welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Or, I don't know, sometimes I think it might be better called the Ominous Hour. Today might be one of those days. Okay, where are we going today? Well, I think you might have an idea from the background. You might recognize an icon from our cultural history, our cult history, occult history, as it may be. Maybe even a couple of icons there. We're going to be talking about, well, let's just give you the title of this one. I'm going to title this one The Truth About Kyles and Karens, the Culture of Kyle and the Supermensch. Okay, let's delve into it. I'm going to be basically telling you some news that really relates to what's going on today. Brings together a bunch of synchronicities for me personally, and for others I know, and for a large group of people who have an interest in such things. Two events are very much in the minds of many people near and dear to me right now. One is the beginning of the Lunar New Year, which is the year of the rabbit, ending the year of the tiger. And the other is an interesting event going on in the skies over my home country, the United States. Much in the news right now is a meteor, not a particularly notable one, but interesting because it has a green tail. It's a green meteor running through the sky, and it has not been seen for 50,000 years, so it's a pretty rare event as these things go. And it's going to be passing over the United States in this year of the water rabbit. Interesting. Now, let's extend this to another synchronicity I got here recently. One of my very spiritual friends who has had a rather rough time of life because he sees things other people don't, and he senses things other people don't, and makes him kind of an interesting character for the folks that he encounters in his life. He happened to contact me about a week ago, and he said, I've seen something really weird. I've got to show this to you because you need to help me figure out what it means. And he showed me a picture he'd taken of a black rabbit standing outside, a black rabbit with green eyes, which is something you don't see every day. And, well, I wish I had his picture. He posted it on Facebook, so if anybody doubts me and the veracity of my story, they can check it easily. At any rate, this black rabbit with the green eye, he mentioned to me, and I said, well, you know, it's kind of interesting. This is the year of the rabbit coming in about a week. Actually, it was yesterday, the start of the Chinese New Year, which is the beginning of the lunar calendar. I think it starts with a full moon. I don't know. I wasn't looking outside last night. Why they serve up moon cakes during the Chinese New Year. Little known fact, at least in the West. At any rate, he said, you know, it's kind of unusual seeing a black rabbit, especially one that has green eyes. What does this mean? Is it something spiritual? And I said, well, given what you told me about your experiences and what I believe, because I've had similar experiences, I would say that it's a sign. Maybe not just for you, but maybe a sign that is meant for others, and you just happen to be the messenger that saw it, which is often how synchronicities work. A lot of things come together, and eventually everyone sees enough to make it into something prophetic, or in hindsight, that should have been prophetic if anybody had been listening to the right prophets. Or the right prophets weren't trying to make profits from their prophecy and turning it into a cult. A cult. Okay, so where am I going with this? It turns out that when I then went to YouTube and I saw that very respected reporter of scientific information on YouTube, he's got a very active following, Anton something, man, I'm going to have to plug him. Any rate, he was discussing this strange comet that comes every 50,000 years. And it occurred to me that the green, going with the comet, bing, light bulb went on with my childhood. And, you know, Superman was a big thing back then. The comics were really popular. And the story was that Superman was a space person, an ET basically, that came from a planet that had been destroyed, and his parents set him on a spaceship and launched it towards the Earth with him inside before they all got blown up with their planet. And it's funny, many of you don't know this, but you've heard the story of the Death Star, the Star Wars version of it, where Leia is seeing or sensing, people are sensing her home planet blowing up. Anyway, Superman was a huge, huge cult icon. Before Batman, in fact. Much bigger than Batman at one time. Batman was kind of like the competition that came in to try to horn in on Superman's market. This was the original action hero, comic book hero, before Marvel Comics, in fact. This was the man of the hour. Now this is interesting. I'm going to start using some websites to show you how interesting this is. Now, if we go look a little bit at where Superman came from, here's an American comic books. The first one was dated April 18th, 1938. So about a year before World War II began, in fact. Says he was born on the fictional planet Krypton and was named Kal-El. And this ties with the green because kryptonite, the material that he was allergic to, if you will, took away his powers, was this green, the remnants of his original planet that had been made poisonous, I guess, to anybody that was left of their descent. And so, you know, if you were a villain wanting to fight Superman, you wanted to get a piece of kryptonite and hook it up in some special way to take away his powers so you could do evil. Now, what's interesting, there's a lot of okay, and it says his original name was Kal-El. Okay, now if you follow my channel much, you know that El is a very special, E-L, means shining one or God in the Bible. The Elohim are the gods that created humanity. Not one God, but many gods. Kal-El then obviously was given as a god name by somebody who knew about El. Now why Cal? This is interesting here. California, here we come. Before we go there, though, I'm going to go a little bit further down the rabbit hole here and show you that basically this idea of Superman developed. Some kids doing comic art, Turns out that they originally, I'll give these guys credit, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Bugsy Siegel, Schuster and Sons, big publisher. Glenville High School, Cleveland. The original Superman, the original character is a homeless man named Bill Dunn, who's tricked by an evil scientist into consuming an experimental drug. The drug gives him all these powers, and he uses these powers maliciously for profit and amusement, and then the drug wears off, leaving him a powerless vagrant again. Now, most of you who know anything about Superman say, well, that's not the Superman I know. He was a bad guy who took experimental drugs developed by evil scientists, and eventually went full circle and ended up a homeless vagrant again. Well, obviously the world didn't like that, and their creation didn't get published. Although apparently somebody liked the idea of a man given powers against their will, but they took out the unscrupulous scientist and made it happen because of a planetary collision. They put a cape on him to kind of evoke a bat. That happened later, actually. You can read all this. I'm not going to go real deep into any one rabbit hole. I just want to point out that they eventually got hooked up with a guy named Russell Keaton, who drew the Buck Rogers and Sky Road comic strips. And then he starts evolving further. Okay, that's where they added that in the distant future, Earth is on the verge of exploding due to giant cataclysms. The last surviving man sends his 3-year-old son back in time to the year 1935. The time machine appears on a road where it is discovered by motorists Sam and Molly Kent. The Kents. This might be an interesting time to talk about Clark Kent. Now, Clark is not a real common name. I don't know anybody named Clark, and the only Clarks that come to mind from Hollywood fame are Clark Gable, who actually was named Clark. William Clark Gable was actually born in Ohio too, to German parents who would have named him Wilhelm if they had named him in the old country. He was a baptized Roman Catholic who wasn't raised Catholic, but then the family objected, and the objection was resolved when his father agreed to allow him to spend time with his maternal uncle, Charles Herschelman, and his wife on their farm in Pennsylvania. Interesting. Now, that Clark was, of course, one of the big heroes. If you've ever watched Gone with the Wind, you know that he was the heartthrob of the era, even though everybody knew that his breath smelled horrible and nobody wanted to kiss him. Now, here's something interesting. On his birth certificate, he was mistakenly listed as male and female in the county register. The clerk later corrected it to male. Isn't that strange? Isn't that odd? Anyway, he became a movie star. Next we have Clark Wilhelm Griswold, who is the anti-hero of the next generation of Hollywood. The older white guy who drives his family crazy, who does everything stupid, who is like the prototype for the Kyle, the male version of the Karen. Interesting. And is one of the icons of the destruction of the patriarchy by California. Now, if we take a look at California, Cal-L, where does that Cal from? Well, Apparently, Superman didn't become very well known till Californian success people got a hold of him. California, California. Now they'll tell you that there was some fictional queen, Califia, east of the Indies. Blah 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 blah. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. This is one of these wonderful names, kind of like Hollywood, which is about the most unholy place on the earth. Kali is the destroyer. Let's see. Let's just read about Kali here. Mother goddess, goddess of war, anger, time, change, creation, destruction, and power. Kali is basically the original Build Back Better goddess. And supposedly she emerged from Shiva. Shiva is a very strange part of the Hindu pantheon because Shiva is kind of a hermaphrodite. Shiva is like the Hindu version of Hermes, who was also a hermaphrodite originally. And Kali is the one who inspired the Shakta Hindu and Tantric sects, who, if you don't know anything about Tantra, those are the ones that generate magic through sex. Tantra is essentially the spiritual practice of using sex for magic. Okay, this is getting weird, isn't it? Also, you'll remember Kali from the Kali Yuga. Oh, I think what's another thing funny to point out here is, says, let's see. Where does it say that? Oh, here we go. No, maybe it's not there. I think it's in this one. Kali Yuga is the fourth and worst of the four yugas, world ages, in a yuga cycle preceded by Dvapara Yuga and followed by the next cycle, Krita Satya Yuga. It is believed to be the present age, which is full of conflict and sin. The Kali of Kali Yuga means strife, discord, quarrel, and contention, and Kali Yuga is associated with the demon Kali, not to be confused with the goddess Kali. Oh, come on, she's a demon, all right, and I will prove it to you. So we've got Kali and California. That's what makes it so funny. Is what's the root of forn? What else begins with that root? Fornication. Californication is actually a term that's been invented to describe what's happened to California. It's a place of great sin and great deception and a lot of evil hiding behind a goody appearance, which is essentially what this goddess Kali is and what Shiva is. And I will now move to Egypt. Let's go to Egypt now. Well, now let's see. Now, the Egyptian view of the soul involves the Ka and the Ba. The Ka being the person's double, which supposedly you can bring back in a new body, which is how the pharaohs passed on their legitimacy to their heirs, and the Ba. Ka-El, Ba-El. Oh, Kal-El is really Ka-El, the person's double. Interesting. And supposedly what binds these two spirits together is the Ankh that the pharaoh carries around that allows them to relive their past lives, or those who pray. It's supposedly the figure of somebody praying for rebirth, for salvation. How interesting. Now, where else do we encounter these concepts? Well, gosh, the stone in the middle of the building, there's a big black building in the court of the great mosque at Mecca that contains a sacred black stone. And the goal of the Islamic pilgrimage, the Hajj, is to visit the Kaa-Ba, where they walk around it backwards, Widershins, not clockwise but counterclockwise, praying. Now, why would you walk around this? And if you read about the Kaa-Ba stone, you will see that most people say that it is a meteorite that dropped and became sacred for some reason. I wonder if it's green, actually, instead of black. Who knows? Nobody gets to go in the Kaa-Ba. Interestingly enough, the mystical tradition of Rabbinic Judaism is called Kabbalah. And we have a word, Cabal, that we use to describe a secret organization that is working for their own ends and may not be working for the people that they were elected by, or whose country they rule, or whatever corporation they rule, whatever. Interesting. Now let's look at Karen. This is a term that used to be just a perfectly normal name. It originated as a Danish name, it says, arising from the Greek word Katarina. Katarina, which sounds more Russian, more steppish to me. And the I, that sounds like Chinese. That means love. Katarina, which is believed to mean pure. In French, the name can also mean clear, though it retains the meaning of pure across most other backgrounds. Nowadays, Karen is a slang term for a white woman perceived as entitled or demanding beyond the scope of what is normal. The term is often portrayed in memes depicting white women who use their white privilege to demand their own way. Now you see where this is going? White privilege? I'm sorry, this is cult Marxist talk, and Karen has come to be a very important part of the cult Marxist meme. Now it's used for almost everybody that just disagrees with you. Oh, what a Karen. Before we leave this name, let's look at its association with Ka. Ka-Ren. Ka-Ren. Well, if you know any Mandarin, you know that Ren is people. Ka people. Interesting. That would seem to say that Ka-Ren, or those of this Egyptian cult of passing down spiritual entitlement through either the male or the female line. Interesting. Kyle. Let's look at Kyle. Kyle is a unisex English language given name derived from the Scottish Gaelic surname Kyle, which itself is from a region in Ayrshire, from the Scottish Gaelic cowl, narrow or straight. Well, you remember Old King Cole? Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He asked for his pipe, and he asked for his bowl, and he asked for his fiddlers three. I don't know the rest of that one, but Old King Cole. Now that brings us to another interesting, very interesting association here. We'll go into this more in the next topic. I don't want to spoil too much of where I'm going with this, but Old King Cole is carbon. Let's see, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th element. Now, it's also interesting that karma is another very important concept in religious and spiritual thought. It's interesting, too, that there's other things in the periodic table that begin with K. But let's stick with that. I'm not going to go any down. I just want to mention one other one. Kali. Li is the symbol for the third element, lithium. This very dangerous element that is part of electric car batteries that are supposed to save the world, but actually do more damage to the world than our hydrocarbon burning vehicles do. If you know anything about how lithium is produced, how batteries are made, what happens to batteries after they wear out, it's not a pretty story. Lithium isn't a very pretty thing to deal with. Now, it's interesting, too, that lithium, as I've told you in other segments, is short for Lilith. Lilith is the lithium creator. Remember, all the elements are created by different ones of the old gods. God gives the first idea, the L, and then Lucifer, his favorite male child, I guess, comes in. Oh, I'm going to make it he, L, heel. Well, that's, I guess, what you call somebody that takes your idea and uses it and doesn't give you credit for it, huh? Well, we'll delve into this a little later. Just want to point out the association with King Coal. Now, we can take that further, in fact. Those of you who know about archangels know that there's an archangel Michael. Mikael. Okay, maybe that's another incarnation of Kael. Where can we go with that? Mica is a crystal, polyphyllosilicate minerals that bond in tetrahedral sheets of silica. Tetrahedra. Silicon. Blah, blah, blah. There's more to read there. I'm not going to go into detail. Now, there's also a prophet, Micah. Not to be confused with Mikael. Micah the Moorish-tite. I don't know. Moorish tights? Men in tights? Who knows where we're going with this one? One of the 12 minor prophets of the Hebrew Bible. Okay, I didn't know there were 12 major prophets. I knew there were 12 disciples. Interesting. Contemporary of the prophets Isaiah, Amos, and Hosea. He was from Morsheth, Gath. Goliath was from Gath too, huh? Interesting. That might bear a little bit more reading for my more biblically interested fans. Micah. Let's see, where do we want to go next with this one? Now, there's even a baby center entry for Kael. pal. It says common sibling names are Chloe. Huh. Oh, let's see. Where else might we want to go with that? Yes, let's talk about Supermensch. Superman was basically a sales vehicle for Nazism. You remember that that was the goal of both Nazi science and Nazi occult, was making super people, supermen, and they felt that they had to do it with pure Aryan blood. Now it's odd that this Superman character first made his appearance in American culture 2 years, well, a year before World War II began and 3 years before the U.S. entered the war. Also interesting are a lot of the Jewish names that figure in this story. German names that figure in this story that sure look Jewish to me. Herschelman. That sounds like, if not Jewish, at least Yiddish, which is a little bit odd. What else do I need to mention here? Oh, here's an interesting tidbit that ties in with my synchronicities around this. Ka-Li. Ka is this returning physical spirit being reborn through inheritance. Li, if you know any Mandarin, is one of the words for that is Li in Mandarin is the word for power. It's also the word for acreage, another Li. When they talk about how many acres they bought, they'll say so many Li. When they talk about having power, they say Li. Interestingly enough, when I first went to China on expat assignment with Hewlett-Packard, I was on my preview trip, in fact, checking it out, seeing if I even wanted to go move there for a few years, because I was figuring I would have to give up acting. I'd have to give up pretty much everything I enjoyed. I'd never even thought of going to China in my life. I never thought it was a very interesting place. I love Chinese food, but it wasn't on the top of my list of places to visit, especially having learned about the Chinese Communist Party and what they'd done to the country since they took over. Okay, so I go to Shanghai for a preview trip, a few days, and I'm staying in the Jinmao Tower, the tallest building at the time in China, where the Grand Hyatt is. And I was staying on one of the upper floors. During this trip, some interesting things happened. There was probably the biggest typhoon that Shanghai had seen in about 20 years. I was in this tower, the Jinmao Tower, and this building was swaying back and forth like at least 20 to 30 feet every time it went back and forth. And I was shaking in my shoes, but I didn't want to go out because when I went downstairs and looked at people outside, people were literally being blown down the street if their umbrellas didn't cave first, and hanging onto posts. I saw young women hanging onto posts because they were afraid they were going to blow away. It was that bad. I mean, those of you who live in Florida have some idea of what the big storms are like. if you're caught in the middle of the worst of it. Now, also during this trip, I happened to go visit one of the places where foreigners like to gather. I don't know if it's still there, a place called Malone's. I went there, was it to meet somebody, or just because I heard it was a good place to hang out and get a beer or a glass of wine and meet some other people. And I thought, well, if I'm going to live here, I better go check out and see who's here. Now, while I was at this Malone's place, I met up with a Chinese lady and a Chinese gentleman who were sitting near me. We struck up a conversation. Their English was pretty good. They asked me, where I was from, what I was doing, and blah, blah, blah. And, I told them, well, I'm thinking of taking an assignment here. And I happened to mention that I was also an actor and general things about who I was and what I did. Then they asked, well, have you taken a Chinese name yet? And I said, no, I hadn't really given it any thought. What's a common Chinese name for somebody named Robert? And they said, well, normally a Robert, they would take the Chinese name Lobota because it's the closest to their name. And that didn't strike me as a very good name. It sounded like potato. I think, I don't know. For some reason, it seemed like a not very good name, especially since I'm from the potato state, Idaho. So I nixed that idea and I said, hey, that's not going to work for me. Can you come up with something else? And, something that fits a guy that is on here on a expat assignment with a big company and is also an actor and, would maybe like to start up a theater here sometime. Maybe do some film. See who might want to make some art. And they said, well, gosh, you sound like a Superman. They said, okay, what's Chinese for Superman? And they said, Fei Li Shi, flying power soldier. And then they laughed and they said, it sounds like a dishwashing detergent. That's something kind of like Mr. Muscle dishwashing detergent. And I thought, well, that's funny. I'll go with that. So I became Fei Li Shi. Later on, before I went back, I ended up marrying a Chinese lady with the last name Li. Li Yanfei. Interesting. Her turned out to be a bit of a Lilithian at heart, if you know what I mean. Any rate, so a lot of things got tied together for me that resulted in this talk. I hope that maybe there's some synchronicities for you in the things I've mentioned, maybe something you want to investigate a little bit more, because that's fundamentally what I teach on my channel is the omnist approach to things. And I will remind you, if you haven't gone to see my definition of that, omnism is basically an integrative practice, integrative faith. You take your own experience, you take the experience of people you trust, you take the experience, the measurements of scientists you trust, theories that seem to be well-founded, and you try to find an explanation that fits all the data points, that you don't have to throw out any inconvenient truths. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing since my spiritual awakening accelerated about 5 years ago. And it's been interesting for me to do because not many people have studied physics at Princeton, have worked at Fermilab, the predecessor of CERN, have worked in semiconductors, testing and debugging semiconductors, worked in simulation, designing products and testing them through simulation before setting them in concrete, shipping them out to customers. And somebody who spent like 20 years now, well, more than 20 years, having this passion for acting on the side and singing, and I've even become a reasonably good dancer, I think. Not quite a triple threat, I wouldn't say, but I'd say I'm a double threat. And now on my spiritual leg of my journey. I don't think that anybody could have come to the conclusions, could have tied truths together as I have with any other background. And maybe nobody will understand it until somebody comes along and says, whoa, this Rob guy, something he's saying makes sense. At least enough sense that I'm going to go tie together this with what I learned, what I'm questing for, the questions I have in my mind that aren't getting answered by traditional religions, anti-religions, ideologies, politics, political parties, corporate organizations, NGOs. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. And maybe you'll end up down some of the rabbit holes I've been and come to some of the same conclusions. If you choose to, I wish you luck. I hope your destination is as fine as mine is going to be, because I know where I'm headed. I don't know how it's all going to end, and I don't want to know, because I want to see how the movie, I don't know. Maybe some of you are the kind that go to the end of a book and read the ending first and then go read what's in between. I'm not that kind of person. I'd rather be surprised. That's why I like novelists like Dickens and Tolstoy and Kurt Vonnegut, because they surprise you in surprising ways, and they cover places in between that you would have missed if you just read the Cliff Notes version that was written by some numby-gumby that read the beginning and read the end, and whoever summarized it before and thinks they know what the truth is. You've probably met a lot of those numby-gumbies in your investigations, looking at people's YouTube channels who are trying to get famous by spouting what they read on Wikipedia, which is, cult Marxist in the extreme, which you would know if you ever looked at any of the way back versions of controversial subjects. I think that's enough for today's session. Probably nobody's going to get to see it, but like, share, and subscribe if you do. I understand they're now gaming the algorithm, so people that put content up too frequently don't get featured. Oh, we wouldn't want anybody that puts a lot of content up to get a lot of views, now would we? That would be unfair. So who cares? I'm going to put up content when I want to. The audience will follow if they want to. They'll find me if they are able to, when they are able to, and they'll find out if I've got anything useful to say. Till then, if you're one of those people, like, share, subscribe, pass it on to a friend, and tune in again to the Omnist Hour with Rob Tromp. Happy karma. Ka-El to the future. Take care.